I'm Stephen Bell for Timeline. Much of the world tonight is battling an old foe far deadlier than any of the armies ever seen on this continent. The great pestilence, the plague, has broken out again, and still there's no cure. In Italy, France, and Spain, countless deaths are being blamed on the disease. Some cases have been reported in the German states, but so far England has been spared. The plague has devastated some small towns. In the French village of Managuet, the dead now outnumber the living. 55 people have died there in the past 48 hours. In Siena, Italy, bodies have been lying uncollected in the streets for days. There are not enough carters left alive to bury them. And at the Pope's headquarters in Avignon, 200 people died yesterday. People want to know why, and neither the church nor the civil authorities can answer them. This new plague is certain to increase the social unrest fueled by the last outbreak just 14 years ago. We have a series of reports. First, Ciboletto of Zimbabwe in France.
Here in the cathedral in Paris, priests and monks pray for God's mercy as the number of dead rises. No one really knows what to do. Many churchmen are leaving their posts, abandoning their congregations, thinking only to save themselves. And the people of Paris find themselves again facing the nightmare they thought was over almost a generation ago. With me now is Guy de Chauliac, surgeon to the royal family who himself caught and survived the pestilence in that first outbreak. Doctor, is it certain this is the same plague as before?
Signs are unmistakable. It starts with high fever, dark patches on the skin, black tumors on the neck, or in the armpits or groin. Patients with this type of plague have at least a small, very small chance of recovery. But when the plague comes into the lungs, there's no hope. As soon as the sick start coughing and spitting blood, death comes quickly. But not only for them, but for all those close by.
No one knows how or why the plague passes from person to person, or why some who nurse the sick are spared, while others die alongside their patients. But many doctors believe the best way of countering contagion is with sweet-smelling fires, or surrounding the sick with pungent smells.
How can smoke fight the will of God? He sent the pestilence as a punishment for man's mortal sins. But we didn't heed him with our sinful ways. Now, his anger falls on us again, and this time, no one will escape his wrath.
Everything in the world is made up of the four elements: earth, fire, water, and air. This pestilence comes from the corruption of air. When the element air breaks down, it forms thick, sticky miasma. If such miasma comes into contact with people or animals, it upsets the balance of the body and can cause plague.
Is there any way to control the miasma?
Aromatic smoke can break up the corruption. So can some sounds. The ringing of bells, soft music, hymns. But there's too much of the bad air. One might as well use a cup to empty the ocean.
It's just a few weeks since the first reports came in of this new outbreak of plague. Every hour sees more people die, and it's feared it could soon exceed that of the last great pestilence 13 years ago. Doctors now seem as helpless to combat the disease as they were then. From plague-struck Paris, this is Ciboletto of Zimbabwe reporting.
And just since Ciboletto filed that report, we've learned that 1,400 people died today in Paris, thousands more in the rest of France. Things are no different in Italy. In one city, the plague has returned, bringing not only death, but also nightmares that most had forgotten. Louis de Hein is in Siena.
In the first outbreak, over half this city's population, more than 30,000 people, died within 6 months. And then it left as suddenly as it had arrived. And the citizens of Siena, like most of Europe, put tragedy behind them. For many times were good. There were high wages because labor was so scarce, lower rents, a chance to improve their lot in an emptier world. The plague has returned, has changed all that.
To see these sights I never thought I'd see again, except in purgatory. The bodies are agony. My brother died screaming. I've seen fathers abandon their children, husbands their wives. Last time, great pits were dug, since none could be found to bury the dead properly, out of love or even out of greed. No priest, no service. Just toss them in and quickly cover up the pit.
Maybe God plans to finish us off this time. Who could blame him, seeing all the wickedness in the world? There's been no priest here for 12 years. Last one up and ran to the hills when the pestilence first came knocking at the door. He wasn't much of a man. More interested in stuffing his stomach than he was in saving souls. But he was a priest. They never sent us another. Rich bishops in fine palaces, they don't care for simple folk like us. How can the village survive? Folks get lazy. Why bother working when you could be dead tomorrow? No one's even bothered with the spring planting. It's easier to take what you need from the dead. I do what I can. And if God cares for common folk, then I reckon he won't mind if I say a prayer or two over the dead.
In this latest outbreak, people know only too well what to expect from the pestilence. For the past week, the streets have echoed with the rumble of wheels, the carts of the dead with their dreadful cargoes, and the wagons of the rich fleeing for open country, where they hope plague won't follow. Over and over again, I hear people say, why? Why is God so angry? How can it happen again?
But has anything changed from last time? Is anyone able to give any hope that things will improve?
Cities are setting up boards of health in response to the emergency. But few have confidence in priests or doctors. They were helpless before, they are helpless now.
Thank you, Louis. When we come back, a look at where this disease may have come from. History could give us the answer.
Witness a miracle in the making at Cordoba Brothers Papers. Our tireless devotion to the Eastern art of papermaking assures you an experience you will never forget. Far superior to parchment. It's smooth, it's white, it's paper.
It's not just a manuscript. It's a miracle.
Fine papers from Cordoba Brothers for words that will pass the test of time.
It's been 14 years now since that first outbreak of plague, and we appear to be no closer to solving many of the mysteries that surround it. Back then, ships plying the eastern trade routes are believed to have brought the disease to Europe. Plague followed the sailors relentlessly and struck every port. First Constantinople, then the rest of Byzantium. Then it headed west and began its devastation of Europe on the island of Sicily.
Genoese merchants were on board sick with black boils the size of hen's eggs. At first, we tried to care for them, but when our people began to show the same terrible swellings, we had no choice. We made them leave, but already it was too late. Now other towns shun us, as if we could pass on the disease with just a glance. May God have mercy on Messina.
There was no escape. People isolated victims or drove them out, but nothing stopped the disease. This time, Europe has had some advance warning. North Africa and Egypt have been fighting the plague all winter. But just like before, the best minds in the Muslim world have found no way to combat it. Salim Karasi in Cairo has a report.
The water wheels on the Nile are still, and no muezzin remains alive to call the faithful to prayer. The Sultan and his court fled last October as soon as the first deaths were reported. Ever since, the pestilence has spread rapidly. City authorities have tried to count the number of coffins passing through the gates. But as in the first outbreak, precise figures of how many have died are almost impossible to come by.
I buried my 2 sons with my own hands, and another boy who had no one left to grieve over him. And now my father, too, goes to join the martyrs.
The plague that ravaged Cairo 12 years ago virtually wiped out the labor force. In recent years, many of the survivors in the countryside, lured by tales of high wages, migrated to the city. But today, once again, many of the streets are deserted. The prophet said, one should not flee the plague, but only the most pious will stay behind when they see their leaders fleeing. No one will bring food to the city, even if there were customers to buy it. The only merchants making a profit are those selling magic cures, herbs and potions alleged to ward off the plague. For these, people will pay any price.
There is no cure. How can there be when plague comes direct from Allah?
There is a tradition of the Prophet that those who die of plague are honored with a special place in paradise, alongside those who are martyred in battle.
One place not deserted is the bathhouse. Muslims believe that if they are going to die, then it's best to face Allah clean and purified.
I advise those who tend to flee. Mortality is worse in crowded cities. Plague travels from person to person, and no pious verse will make it otherwise. But I don't take my own advice. Doctors must remain with the sick, even if there's little enough we can do to cure them. Massages, soothing music, fragrant steam, fruit juices, all these help keep the body calm and balanced. And if the body is calm, then the plague miasma may not destroy it.
How can miasma be the cause of plague when one house is spared, another not? One city depopulated, another left untouched. Evil spirits, jinns carried the plague, and their darts pierce those who are not protected.
My father carries such a magic amulet all through the last great pestilence, and he died peacefully of old age in his bed 2 years ago. The imams may not approve, but a man needs protection, whether the plague comes from miasma or the plague darts off the jinns.
It's hardly surprising that people are turning to folk remedies and magic, since even here at the heart of Islamic civilization, doctors and men of God have shown themselves as powerless against the plague as their less learned colleagues in Western Europe.
But the plague came back to Cairo almost 5 months before it hit Western Europe. Do experts see a similar pattern to the first outbreak?
Everyone has a different opinion. No doctor or scholar agrees with another, whether it be the nature of the plague or how to cure it. The honest ones admit that nobody knows.
20 years ago, it was said to have originated in the East, perhaps from as far away as China. There were then rumors of great calamities at the far end of the Mongol Empire. Earthquakes and floods, huge storms of fire and plague that left whole cities empty, like a great cloud driven by the wind of Allah across the world. It corrupted every country it passed.
In that last outbreak, half the population of Cairo died. It was the same in Damascus, Alexandria, in all the neighboring cities. Now with the plague's return, people are despairing. They ask why. If the plague is a mercy of God, why is it being visited on his people twice in a single generation?
Thank you, Salim. We've now seen the plague's impact on North Africa, Italy, and France, and it's obvious that doctors are losing the battle. Joining us now from the Hotel Dia Hospital in Paris is the royal surgeon, Guy de Chauliac. Doctor, to put it bluntly, why can't you stop